Hello everybody, welcome back to the United Stands. I'm Mark Goldbridge and this is your Ruben Amorim press conference reaction. Lots to get into. We're going to start off what he said about Rashford, but there was all sorts of stuff in there. Bruno Fernandes spoke to the press as well about whether he can adapt to a new system under Amorim. Loads and loads of notes. Only the second match interview for Amorim, so still very excited. Sorry we're a bit late, but they were late, so that made us late. So there we go. But look, I suppose the first place we're going to start off, he was asked about Marcus Rashford. We will try to help him. That position, lone striker, is not the best one for him. He was fighting with two giants. We have to find the best solution for him. He has to be Marcus to return to that moment. He has to be the first one to want it. This manager's not pissing about. You know, we spoke about this morning about data. We spoke about this morning about the demands of Amorim. We spoke about this morning how Amorim will not be interested in what you've done before. He won't be interested in the number on the back. He won't be interested in the wages. He'll look at the data, he'll look at the performance, and he will make decisions based upon that. It was quite interesting that the journalist who asked Amorim the question about Rashford actually referenced 2 years ago when he scored 30 goals. And straight away, I thought, I know the answer. If we're going to learn anything from what Pedro told us this morning, I know the answer. It isn't going to matter to Amorim that he scored 30 goals 2 years ago, because basically it's about what you do now. That's what it's all about, isn't it? It's about what you do now. And I think that the answer to the question is absolutely spot on. And basically what he's saying is, I've not got a live chat at the moment, so if anybody, Ralph, it's okay. I was just reading about somebody going, the start times are irregular. Yeah, it's got nothing to do with us. We're doing a press conference reaction. We're in the hands of Manchester United and they're late. So I think what you're saying about Rashford is that, look, these questions need to stop. I mean, some of the questions were absolutely abysmal. There was a question about Ed Sheeran. You know, we were at the press conference. We didn't even get a bloody question. There was other journalists who didn't get a question. You know, you put your hand up, you get asked a question. He asked them about bloody Ed Sheeran. Get out, never come back. The amount of questions that could be asked, good. And he gets a question about Ed Sheeran. The quality of some of the people they let in there is abysmal. And it has been for years, to be fair. But look, on Marcus Rashford, I think that these sort of questions need to stop. We got updates on injuries, I'll give you that. We spoke about Yoro, spoke about Martinez, we spoke about the style of play, spoke about what's needs to change. But the questions about PR players needs to stop. We used to get Maguire questions every bloody week. Now we're going to get Rashford questions every week. We're all ready for a new era. Can we get a new era of questions in the press conference? Because asking about the PR player every week, and when I mean PR, it's not Rashford's fault. It's just Marcus Rashford, the biggest English talent at Manchester United. Why is Rashford not playing? Why is England not picking Marcus Rashford? And the bottom line is, these journalists know why. He's not playing well enough, is he? That's why he doesn't get picked for England. The question is, can he keep getting picked for Manchester United? And that is Ruben Amorim's job. And what he's basically saying is that, look, we will help the player, but he has to find the solution for himself. He has to be Rashford before we can help him. He's got to be the first one to want it. And then we can find the solutions for him. But he said it's the same for other players as well. You could say the same of Anthony. You could say the same of any player that's underperforming. They've got to find themselves, and then the club and the staff and the players will help them. Realistically, it's just refreshing to have a manager talking in a press conference the way we've been talking for 2 years. I've been saying this since the start of last season. Rashford will come back. The Rashford will come back. And the point is, I don't know whether he will come back. Why do people always knock on my bloody door when I'm doing a press conference? Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. So yeah, I think it's put that in your pipe and smoke it. What is Amorim saying wrong? Publicly, we know what the situation is. You've got to work hard, you've got to improve, you've got to play well. We cannot be a club anymore that looks at the name on the back of the shirt and justifies a place in the team. He said it for the second time since Ipswich. That doesn't suit Rashford. It's very interesting, and I think we almost deserve a virtual handshake, all of us. I said last week when the rumour was that Rashford was going to start up front. I don't think it'll work. I don't think he's a striker. So it's very interesting that Amorim has again said a few days after Ipswich that that's not the position for him. We've got to find a solution for him. And I believe that solution for Rashford will be behind the striker as one of the two. And I think that's where we'll see him next. Anyway, let's continue with what Amorim had to say. Marus, welcome to the Members Club. You're a legend. Thank you very much. So on injuries, we saw Lisandro Martinez and Harry Maguire back in training today. This is great news because obviously we play 3 centre-backs at the back. Bruno Fernandes was also in the interview as well, so we can talk about what he had to say. I must admit, my opinion on Bruno Fernandes has changed massively, by the way, because of Pedro. I've always liked Bruno Fernandes. He's always been one of my favourite players, but he's frustrated me for the last 10 months, I've got to be honest. And I will never not call it. Man United's more important to me than any player. So if a player I think is not doing what they should be doing, I don't care whether they're a favourite or not, I will call it out. As I've said before, the players who get criticised really must have weak mentalities, because when you're being criticised at Man United, it's actually because we think you're good. I've never really given a shit about people like Phil Jones or Rojo or anybody else because I don't actually think they're that good. But when you're talking about the Rashfords and the Brunos and the Casemiros, it's actually because you think they're good and they're not as good as you think they are. That's why they get criticised. But look, great to have these players back, Martinez and Maguire. Martinez is ready to play, according to Amorim. He is ready. So that's a lot quicker than what somebody said last week, that it'd be 2 or 3 weeks. So that's fantastic news. Martinez is ready to go. Maguire is not ready yet. He is just back training. So he said we need both, and that Harry will be back playing soon. Yoro, he said, basically, I think I've read this right or heard it right. I think what he's saying with Yoro is that Yoro won't play tomorrow. No Yoro tomorrow because Yoro is available to train, but he's currently working on fitness and they're trying to prepare him in the best way possible. So obviously Yoro, actually, when you think about it, hasn't played a competitive game since last May. I mean, we're talking nearly 8 months. So I suppose, you know, Maguire's been out for a while, but he has played games this season. Yoro hasn't. So I think with Yoro, he is training, but he's not ready to play. And I do remember Ben Jacobs saying mid-October that they were looking at Yoro for the Arsenal game. That might even come too soon. So it doesn't look like Yoro will be involved unless they're playing a game there. He was asked about what it's going to be like to manage his first time at Old Trafford. He said it's going to be very special, but I just want to win. I just want to win the match. He was asked about whether there'll be rotation in the game against Bodo Glimt. I really liked a couple of things he said actually about Bodo Glimt, so I'll read them now. He said, we have to rotate. There's lots of games coming up, blah, blah, blah. You'd expect that. But what I really liked was this. We have to rotate because this is the beginning of something. And you have to make everybody feel part of it. Everyone has to be on the same page. And I think that's really important, that we will see rotation. But he hasn't made his mind up on who his favourites are. He hasn't made mind up on who his starting 11 is. So if he's got 23 players, what he's saying is, I have to rotate. I have to use these players. I have to make sure everybody feels like they've got a chance and they're part of it. Because if I just pick the same team against Ipswich that I did against Ipswich, and then Everton, and then in the Everton game, I get a player sent off and a couple of injuries, and then I go to players that I haven't given a chance to, they're not going to be ready, they're not going to be fit, they might not be motivated. So we're going to see a lot of rotation, and I think therefore, in relation to my preview last night, I would probably make a couple more changes. Like I probably would expect Mason Mount will play. I think there might be a couple of other players as well. So I think we'll see Rose, maybe even Xerxes will start as well. So I think that's very, very important. He explained a little bit actually about how the squad splits, because he says that if you don't play tomorrow, you train hard on Friday and Saturday. But if you do play tomorrow, you don't train at all for 2 days. It's just light work. So the squad does split so that if you haven't played, he will run a hard training session the day after. But if you did play, obviously you don't train. So he's just explaining how the squad does split quite a lot. They're not always training together. He also said about Bodo Glimt, which I thought was interesting. He said they run a lot and they've got good wingers. They're also used to winning and it will be an intense, good game. and we need to improve from Ipswich. I don't care whether they're going to make any changes because they've got a big game on Sunday. The important thing is that we win and build our focus on that. But what he did say is, Bodo Glimt run a lot. This is going to be good for us. I want to play teams that run a lot because we need to run a lot. So we need to learn to run a lot. And I think that's really important as well. He was asked about, Bruno was asked about, a couple of questions for Bruno actually. Bruno was asked about, good couple of questions actually. Blame for Ten Hag. Bruno mentioned it in the international break. So he was asked about, whether he still feels that now the manager has been changed. And Bruno reiterated, very good point. He said, look, if you change a manager through a season, then everyone's got to take some blame because it's not gone right. And he said, it's easier to get rid of a manager than to sack 15 to 20 players. I've always said this about Bruno. I can be critical of him. Of course I can. And I know everybody else can. But he never stops running. He's never not available. And I sense that even though he deserves some criticism, absolutely, I sense he feels the frustrations that you do. Because for him to still be saying, you can only sack a manager, you can't sack 15 to 20 players, that's very self-reflective for a captain to say that. And I think what he's saying is that, look, the manager's always going to get sacked, but actually there probably should be a load of players getting sacked as well, but that's never going to happen. And he probably wouldn't mind that happening, because for him to say that twice, I think there is a frustration from his part that he is sometimes surrounded by players that don't have the availability, the ambition, etc. And that's not to give him an excuse, because he hasn't played particularly well in this calendar year. But I don't think his dedication, ambition to the cause are the issue. I mean, there was a question about whether there was a question about I think it was from Usman actually, who was there with DAZN, who's been on the fan forum, and he said about change and whether the change concerned him having to play differently, and he said he basically said that you always have to adapt, and it's a new system, and as the captain as well, the manager will sometimes be talking to me, and that's part of my role as well, which sometimes we don't think about. He was basically saying that as the captain, I've got to understand the system, because the manager will only be able to talk to me sometimes. So I have to understand what the back three's role is. I have to understand. He didn't say this, but I'm building on what he said, because what he basically said is, my role is my role, but then as the captain, the manager might speak to me, so I need to understand everybody else's role so I can communicate it. And it's an important thing that we probably don't think about, is that you look at Rooney, I don't think he was the same player as the captain. Maguire wasn't the same player as the captain. Bruno's not been the same player he was as the captain. But we forget that when you're not the captain, you're responsible for yourself. And when you are the captain, you're responsible for yourself and everybody else, and the referee, and you're talking to the manager, and you've got to tell everybody else what's going on as well. So I think that what I would say is that it's definitely something that we have to take into account. And what it means is that Bruno has to understand how the back three plays. He has to understand what the striker's role is so that he can communicate with that, which is obviously important. But he also elaborated on that, because obviously I think that, look, he was basically saying, look, I think it might be harder for some of the younger players, because although Bruno is 30, and some people would say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I'm not calling Bruno a dog, by the way. It's a saying in England. He said, I think it might be harder for some of the younger people younger players to deal with it, because I watch Sporting, and I watch Sporting because I like Sporting. I came from Sporting, so he's like, I know how Sporting play. Also, as an international player, you go and play for Portugal, I might play as a 10, I might play as a 6, I might play as an 8. Sometimes we play with a back three. So I'm used to playing in different situations. I think the issue with Bruno is discipline. I think we in this community don't think that Bruno can't play as a false 9 or as a right winger or as a 6 or as an 8 or as a 10. I think we all think he can play those roles. The problem is he sometimes plays them all in one game, and that's chaotic, and we've seen that. The issue with Bruno is he actually is a remarkable player. As Pedro was saying this morning, he's a remarkable player. He's a great player in the sense that he can play so many different roles. The issue is he does it in one game. He doesn't play one role. The issue for Bruno is discipline. If Amorim says, I want you to be a number 10, you have to be a number 10. I don't want to see you in the number 6 position. If I put you in the pivot, you have to stay in the pivot. And that is where Bruno has to trust his team, because we've all played, well, if you were good, I've played the game. When I used to play up at lunchtime school, secondary school, we'd play from the age of 11 till about 16. Every lunchtime we'd get a ball and go and play on the top fields, 5 against 5. And sometimes you'd have a few players on your team that weren't as good as the people on that. Well, I wouldn't just stand up front. You know, you'd run everywhere because you'd want to win. So you'd track back, boundless energy at that age. Bruno reminds me of what it's like when you're on a team that's not as good as the opposition team and you can't trust the players around you. So you're playing up front, centre back, sometimes you rush goalkeeper, you roll it out to yourself. That's what Bruno plays like at Man United. So to get Bruno's discipline, he's got to be disciplined, but he's also got to look around the team and go, I trust them. And that's going to be the issue, I think. This question about Ed Sheeran. What a waste. What I've just wrote Ed Sheeran ... Somebody got a question quite early in the press conference and asked about Ed Sheeran. I mean, they probably driving back now or on the train home going, oh, wow, I'm such a comedian. Waste of time, mate. Absolute waste of time. If you want any help next time, pop a question in the United Stand and we'll give you 50 questions that actually people want to listen and answer to. I mean, Ed Sheeran. Ten Hag. Amorim was asked about that, what he said after the Ipswich game about suffering for a long period. How long? Great question, this, actually. I don't know who asked it. It was one of the journalists, but it was... you mentioned suffering for a long period at the start of the week, after the Ipswich game. How long? We actually had this question. Me and Beth were talking about it last night. So if we'd have been allowed to ask a question in the press conference, we would have asked this question. So it's a very good question. Amorim said, hard to compare Sporting because it's a different league. However, there are more experienced players here than I had at Sporting. And we need to grow confidence. But at this moment in time, I'm not sure how long it's going to take for us to get where people want us to get, because I haven't got the time to train, which makes it harder. So what we've got to try and do is win and learn. And this is the truth. It's exactly what Emery did at Villa. You go in as a good coach and you don't have a pre-season, you don't have time to train. So and look, this is the most intense time. I actually think it would have been better for Amorim if he'd have come in for the Chelsea game, Leicester game, and the what was the game before the international break? It was Leicester, wasn't it? Yeah, Leicester. Chelsea, Leicester. So I think it would have been good if he could have come in for that time, because it's so intense now. Like, there's no time to take any break. It's a game every 3 days, 4 days, every 3 or 4 days. And I agree with him. It's we were talking about it on the morning show. How long is it going to take for Man United to compete for a title? I quite like 2028 as a line in the sand. Could take longer, could be quicker, but how long it's going to take? Very intelligent from Amorim to say, I'm not going to give you any time. I'm not going to give you a date because I don't know. My system, and he spoke about his system, I'll talk about that now. The system is going to have to be... It's really difficult because he's not even starting, really. If you take into account a couple of things he said in the press conference, he can't train the players properly because they're always recovering from games and there's always a game. They've got to learn the system in real games. Now, you compare that to pre-season, loads of training, loads of games to try stuff that don't really matter. So he can't do any of that. And that's obviously going to be very, very important. But also, that would still be hard if he knew his best 11. You still got to train them and they've got to learn. But he doesn't even know his best 11 either. So not only is he training them and getting them to learn in real time, he's also learning about the squad in real time, which means he will make mistakes. He'll pick Christian Eriksen and Casemiro as holding midfielders and it'll be a mistake. But he'll have to learn about it in a competitive game, which is why, as much as I thought Rashford up front and Eriksen and Casemiro was a mistake in the midfield, I'm not going to be critical of it because, as he said, I've got to make everybody feel part of it and I've got to learn about everybody on the job. He could have done that in a pre-season friendly against bloody Swindon, but he can't do that. So this is even more reason for patience, and it's even more reason to silence the media that try and put the pressure on Man United. Because although he might think Rasmus is his striker, he's got to try Rasmus, Rashford, Xerxes to make sure that's the one he wants to go with and to give everybody a chance. So there's a lot of that. J-Deep says, speaks volumes then, but every United captain is just too busy focusing on everyone else executing the tactics than his own game. Low footballing IQ indeed, says J-Deep. And Patrick says, Patrick Lynch, thank you very much for your super chat, says, Bruno feeling he needs to help everyone is part of the issue. He should be confident in those around him so he can play his game. We need more leaders than just him out there. You know what? I don't understand. I've said this so many times. I think you've absolutely nailed it, Patrick. I don't understand these United players who feel that they get criticised unfairly. I think with Bruno, I've always been very consistent about how much I like him as a player. Before he came to Man United, that Mallorca holiday when I thought the ship was sinking and I called it Bruno because we didn't get him in the summer. Then we got him in the January and I said he'd be transformative to the club because he was brilliant at Sporting and he was transformative. Over the last 8 months, he's fell off. There might be reasons for it, but what I cannot deal with is people who try and paper the cracks and pretend it's not happening. There are fans, Bruno FC, who just won't have it. What Patrick says is true. Maybe Bruno doesn't play well because he doesn't trust the people around him, which makes him indisciplined and makes him run around, which damages his performance. There might be a justification for why he doesn't play well, because he's always running around trying to do other people's jobs because he doesn't trust them because they're not good enough. And that damages his game. But it still damages his game. He's still getting 5 out of 10 instead of 8. Nobody's saying he's doing it on purpose. No one's saying he's not good enough, although Ricky might. There's something damaging Bruno's game. And I think Patrick is right. And I think we've spoken about it before. He's indisciplined. And he's indisciplined because he doesn't trust people. And I think if Amorim can build a team and make Bruno disciplined, we will get a better Bruno. It's as simple as that. Coy Reen says Bruno definitely watches the United stand. I don't know about that. What else did Amorim have to say? This was a good question, but it didn't really develop into the answer we wanted. He said that, does it concern you that you've got so many top players at Manchester United who aren't able to work things out, i.e. they're not very good at tracking back, they misplace passes? To be fair, it's a good question because we've seen this over the years. We pay 300k for this player, 200k for that player, 250k for this player. They don't work hard enough. They're no good at pressing. They're not good at picking up their man. They're passing shit. I mean, how many goals have we conceded in the last 18 months where it's a simple cutback and no one's picked up the runner? Very basic football. Amorim spoke about it after the game. You can't train some of the stuff they're not doing. They're just inexplicably not doing it. So Amorim was asked, does it concern you or confuse you why top players aren't working it out? And he said, look, I'm not surprised by it. It's a new system for him and for the players, but they are improving. But what he did say is that we have to improve and we will play in different systems as well. So he said, look, sometimes against Ipswich it was a 4-4-2. We have to adapt. We're just learning the beginning here. So, I mean, the answer wasn't the answer you would probably want from a question like that, but he's probably not going to give you the answer. The answer you want is, yeah, I'm really surprised. We're paying all this money for these players and they can't do the basics. But he can't say that. As I've just said there, this United dressing room is fragile. There are players in there who can deal with it, but there's a lot of players who can't deal with it. And if they hear a manager or their agent says, they hear what Amorim said, they're going to start downing tools. So you mentally, so he's got to protect his players, and he said he will do that. he was asked about this is what I liked from Amorim. Basically, he was asked a question about goals, and he basically said, "Look, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to make me say I need a new striker." So in the context of, he wasn't asked it, but Amorim read it and went like, you're just trying to get me to say I need a new striker. And he said, look, in the second half of the game against Ipswich, we controlled it, but we weren't dangerous. Maybe that's because the week before we spent so much time working on the build-up. We need to work on scoring goals. And he said, we definitely do need to score more goals, whether that's Rasmus, Rashford, Xerxes, Bruno, Ahmad. We need to score new goals. These players can do it. And in answer to the question whether I need a new striker, these players can do it. And I think that just goes back to what you and I have said for a long time. It's the Rasmus thing. I mean, it's the Rashford thing as well. I mean, in fairness to Rashford, he ain't a striker in my opinion. He's not strong enough. He doesn't hold the ball up well enough. But one chance, one goal. There was only one chance. And I've always said, if you give Rashford a chance in the box, he will score. He is a finisher. He's not a striker, but he will finish. And I think the same of Rasmus. So Amorim's absolutely spot on. And again, it's just speaking the language we know. We need to create chances. There are people out there who supposedly analyse Man United, and they would have us spend £80 million on a striker. And I despair at it. I want us to buy another striker. We spoke about it this morning, but it's not the priority. The priority is to create chances, and then we'll find out whether we need a new striker or not, because we just don't create chances, and we didn't create many chances against Ipswich. And Amorim is absolutely correct on that. Absolutely correct. Think of Victor from Sporting, and Theo Hernandez says, I can't read your name there, but thank you very much. Tom Williams says that Bruno's attitude changed in the Ipswich game. He didn't scream and moan as much and usual. I think his mindset could change with trust in the manager, says Tom Williams. Yeah. Show off the jumper, please, says United Lad. It's a cracker. Well, it is his press conference, so Amorim is coming to town. Amorim, yeah, I won't do the dance. We ship these worldwide, by the way. If you want to get one, links in the video description, and I think it's pinned in there as well. The priority is to have players that can play the system. And going back to what we spoke about at the start, about what he said about Rashford, about I'll try to find the position that best suits him, and we'll try and find a solution like we will do for others. But he's got to find himself, then we can help him. He has to be the first one to want it. What more do you want from your manager? This has been going out for... Some people would say this has been going on for 2 years. Some people would say it's been going on for a year. We haven't had the real Marcus Rashford for 2 years, I don't think. The one that... I mean, it was the Carabao Cup against Newcastle where it stopped. It wasn't all the season. It was the start of the season to the Carabao Cup. It was actually February 2022? No, 3. Yes, February 23 was when Rashford's spark went. He ended the season badly, and then he wasn't very good last season. And this season, it's been okay. So it's coming up for 2 years. And whatever anybody says, if I was sat with Marcus Rashford now, I'd say, look, you can say you're treated unfairly all you like. Take the praise. You haven't been the same player since the Carabao Cup, Newcastle, in 2023, February. That's not criticism, that's a praise. You're not the player you were up until that game. So you have to tell us why, or you have to make yourself get back to that. It's not Amorim's job, it's not Bruno's job, it's not the fan base's job. And that's the end of the question. That's the end of the statement. Amorim is right. He has got to be the one to want it. He has got to be the one to find himself. It's nobody else's problem. It's not a lack of service. It's not a lack of game time. He's got to find it. And that's the manager of Manchester United. So, if there's to be a reply to a tweet or, another interview or anything like that, the manager of Man United's just solved the whole problem. You've got to want it. You've got to find it. A lot of people have been saying that for a long time. It's certainly not United fans or anybody else that's caused the drop-off. There has been a drop-off. You've got to find it. You've got to want it. It's not about the name on the back. It's a clean slate. Let's go. Bodo Glimt is a lethal force, and I can honestly see us losing, says Andreas, but I can also see Amorim system having settled better and total warfare tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I really hope he plays. I really hope there's some changes. I'd like to see Martinez play if he's fit. I'd like to see Luke Shaw play. I don't know how you get them both in the team. I mean, I quite like that, actually. Left-sided centre-back. Luke Shaw, 45 minutes. Martinez, 45 minutes. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. I think that Agate and Mainu in the midfield, I would like to see that instead of Eriksen and Casemiro. Obviously, I'd like to see Rasmus given a go up front, see if we can create some chances. I'd love to watch a game of football where we actually create chances for our striker. I'd like to see somebody next to Bruno, whether it's Ahmad or Rashford or Mount. I'd like to see a different player there. And obviously we've got Everton on Sunday, so you've got to keep an eye on that. But there's an opportunity to rotate and rotate. And what I mean by that is give somebody an hour, take them off, and then they can play against Everton. So I think those things are important as well. Rasmus has a 26.3 conversion rate. Why another striker, says FTG. It is a good conversion rate, but you need the goals. You need the goals. And create the chances. If he doesn't score the goals, then I don't think anyone can complain. Fantastic show. Absolutely loved it. We're back at 7 o'clock tonight, but more importantly, I'm back on my Man United career mode. I've had a horrible start to the season. Season 3. And I've had a horrible start to the season, but we are in the Champions League. Today is a very important stream. Goldbridge Ball. Tune in at 3 o'clock. I will see you over there. 7 o'clock on here. We're Liverpool, Real Madrid at 8 o'clock. And of course, Man United tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Fantastic interview from Amorim again. Loved that. Take care.